welcome to TORAH Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with episode number 15 of Controversial Issues with that crazy rabbi from the Holy Land, Rabbi Chaim Coffman. Rabbi, welcome back to the show again. You know, you're proving yourself to be crazier and crazier every week just for the fact you keep showing up, and I really am grateful. Welcome back, Rabbi. It's good to see you again.
Great to see you. Great. Welcome all the listeners.
Absolutely. I want to encourage everybody tonight to call in because I'm sure you've seen the title already. Oh my gosh, I'm looking at myself on screen. It's like a 30-second delay, and that's distracting as can be. Okay, so I encourage you to call in 855-952-4253 and a memory marker 855-95-BIBLE if you're on the go. And definitely want to call in. But when you call in on the topic for topics for tonight: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Let me give you a little bit of a, I guess you could say, a format for that. Okay, so Rabbi, you know, when I sent you this email, I was thinking there's a lot of things whenever I was a Christian that were forbidden. You couldn't watch secular movies. You couldn't listen to secular music. You know, every single thing that you could possibly imagine was forbidden. You couldn't enjoy ramen noodles. I mean, you could. Okay, so everything was a taboo in Christianity, and I know that there certain things should be, but we're kind of discussing the parameters of it. Now, the one thing we won't get into much detail on, I'm telling you all right now, if you have any direct questions regarding the first topic of the night, the sex part, other than the generality of what we're going to cover, send Rabbi Kaufman an email. We'll get you his email up soon, especially if you have any questions regarding your intimate part of marriage and things of that nature. A couple of questions I'm going to put him on the spot for, which he may not want to answer and he may not answer, is going to be revealed here in just a few minutes. So the drugs part, you know, we've got these new laws out now. It says in certain states you can smoke marijuana. Well, what does God think? You know, is one of my arguments one time with someone was, well, you know, technically it's a seed-bearing plant. So it's like, well, that doesn't mean you could smoke it, or does it? That means you could probably eat it if it's following the kosher laws. But then again, if I'm a Noahide, kosher laws don't apply to me anyway. So there's so many weird variations of that topic that I want to discuss. And then, of course, the rock and roll part. You know, what's permitted and what is really healthy, what's not healthy, what we think God may care about that maybe he's not too concerned with. You know, there's a lot of weird thoughts that pass through my brain. Most of you know me by now. So I'm hoping that tonight Rabbi will be able to clarify most of those. So without...
This is great. Sounds like the Trinity. You got three things. One.
This would be the...
All three of us together.
This would be the unholy Trinity: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Okay.
That's for sure.
So, but you know what's really interesting is, I'll just throw out there from the very get-go, one thing that I learned early on was, you know, sin is taking everything that God created as natural and perverting it. So, and that still applies. I think when we take something and we put a perverted spin-off on it, it could be problematic, you know. So, but that's why you're here. You're the one describing this thing. I'm the one asking the questions. Unless we get some good callers in, the phone lines are open. Putting the phone numbers on your screen in just a moment. So, Rabbi, let's kick off. First, I'm going to run you a question since we don't have any callers yet. Hi, Andrea. It's good to see you. Michelle, thank you both. There's about 12 viewers right now. Hopefully more will tune in. Facebook.
Maybe we'll tune out. We'll see how far I go.
Hey, we had a Facebook post earlier when I put that little video up. One guy, Jay Nauman, he goes, sex? He goes, I'll tune in. I forgot to tell him there's not going to be any kind of visual images. This is purely...
No.
If it is,
I don't want to destroy what's left of my little reputation. So, we're still good.
Yeah, you're good. So, okay, so we're not going to stay on the sex part, but just a few minutes because I agree with Rabbi. This is something that really should be handled more in a private matter. If you got direct questions, specifically questions that are referring to your marriage or a future relationship that you want direct answers on, don't call in with that question. Send Rabbi an email, and you guys can discuss this on a each individual basis is going to be different anyway. So, the few main points I want to discuss with the sex part is this: for a Noahide, We discussed this once before, by the way, but this is the show we want to put it in because that's the title of the show. For a Noahide, is it forbidden for a Noahide to have a girlfriend who they're intimate with, okay, outside of marriage? Now, we know that there are 7 Noahide laws that compose of like 70, possibly somewhere 65, 75, whatever. You mentioned it before. Explain to me and to the viewers, and this isn't just like a mild curiosity. This is a very serious thing because many people struggle with this on a really heavy level. And so, what does Hashem say? What is halacha? What is the role of Judaism? What is your knowledge base based on the sages, based on what Torah says, based on the oral traditions? What does it mean for a Noahide, specifically a Noahide? Because we know what it is for a Jew. What about a Noahide? Give us the lowdown. And I say lowdown because it does seem pretty low down.
Right. So we know that the purpose of being together, a man and a woman, certainly for a Jew, we'll get to a Noahide, is to have children, right? So premarital sex certainly would be forbidden. For a Noahide, there's an obligation to have children in general, right? To populate the world. If we wouldn't populate the world, so, that'd be it. It's game over. We wouldn't have any, we wouldn't have any next generation. And in some places that may actually be the case because you have a negative, a negative birth rate. So a Noahide has an obligation to have children, but they can be split, they can be placed apart. They can be once every 5 years, once every 10 years. It doesn't have to be, in succession. Contraception would be permitted, in that case. But certainly outside of marriage, the only thing that probably may be forbidden, and it's not even, wouldn't even call it necessarily a Torah prohibition, or maybe even a rabbinic prohibition. The idea would be that maybe it's a moral issue, right? Since they don't have an obligation, since there are forbidden relationships, right? The Rambam makes clear there are forbidden relationships, between non-Jews. But let's say it's not a forbidden relationship. If it's not a forbidden relationship, then technically speaking, there really shouldn't be anything, there really shouldn't be anything wrong, with that. The only thing is, it's probably at best, it's probably a moral issue. So we'll date back, I think as we answered this question once, in a quick way, and that is, go back and watch the movie When Harry Met Sally, right? So if you go back and watch that movie, so you'll see that, you can't be friends with the opposite sex because that just gets in the way. Which, you don't have to be Einstein. This isn't rocket science. This is, it's biology 101 or physiology 101, whatever you want to call it. So, in that sense, that would be probably the main issue. Now, technically speaking, also, let's say a Jew and a non-Jew, two non-Jews live together, right? Man and woman live together. According to the Torah, that's considered like they're married, right? If a guy walks out or the woman walks out, they don't need a bill of divorce, right? That is considered, that's considered like that's it, it's over. They want to get a civil marriage, it's one thing, but, anything before that, right, should be in theory permitted. Again, morally speaking, I wouldn't say it's a good idea, but, you'll say, who cares about morals? So that may be true because that's gone out the window, but, they're starting very, very young, right? So, one of the main differences between Judaism and Christianity is Christianity will say, oh, this is terrible, it's taboo, it's icky, it's yucky, it's this, it's that, where we look at it as, it can be harnessed properly, which it should be, even though it's one of the greatest, inclinations that a person has, but has to be used properly. So you say, well, I'm a non-Jew. I don't have a command to be fruitful and multiply like a Jew. That's true, right? There still is obviously an obligation. I shouldn't say obviously, but an obligation, to have children. So if you don't have children, you're not married. Is there really an issue?
Right.
So,
right. Okay. So
drum roll. No. Is there really an issue? No.
Okay.
There's not really an issue. Morally speaking, again, it should be definitely a problem.
Okay, let's take this call. I'm going to interrupt you every time we get a call within a few seconds or at least a minute or so we can go and get as many calls in as possible.
That's just an excuse. You'll interrupt me without a call also.
Hey, real quickly before we let them speak, so is it, just say yes or no, is it a command for the Noahide to be fruitful and multiply, or is it just for the Jew? Yes or no? Well, for the Jew or Noahide?
It's for the Jew.
Okay, not a command to the Noahide. Okay, very good.
But again, there's an obligation to have children in the world, to have people in the world. So that's not the same. That's not the same thing as saying be fruitful and multiply.
Right, because whenever he said be fruitful and multiply, he spoke to not just to Adam. He has said to the animals also. Command, right.
That command, keep in mind, it's not at the beginning of Genesis. It's in Torah portion of Noah, chapter 9, when it says be fruitful and multiply. That's where the command is by Noah when he comes out of the ark.
And chronologically, that was the first commandment chronologically, technically, right?
Right, but when God says to Adam and Eve, be fruitful and multiply, that's not the command to have children, which most people are not aware of.
Whoa, okay, we're coming back to that.
That's a general thing. It's not the command. The command is Genesis chapter 9, verse 6.
Wow, I did not know that. 11. Okay, let's take this call. Caller, please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Hi, my name is Cindy, and I'm calling from Beechwood, Ohio.
Hi, Cindy. Welcome to the show. Do you have a question for Rabbi Kaufman?
Yes. It's not on the subject of sex.
Okay.
It is on the subject of the use of medical marijuana.
Good.
For qualifying medical conditions in states where it is legal.
Very good.
I'm not talking about recreational use.
Right.
I'm talking about prescribed and according to law.
Very good.
I read an article that said that Rabbi Chaim Coffman had declared it kosher as long as the delivery system was not smoking, because smoking is physically injurious. I do not know whether this is true, because you cannot believe everything you read.
Wow, that's really interesting though, because honestly, I never actually thought about that, because it does actually go into your lungs and it clogs your lungs. I'm really glad you called in with that. That's a great question. I'm really excited. Rabbi, did you? Okay, I know you heard her, but I think when you respond, Rabbi, you could say hi. She may not be able to hear you well. I think I had some one-way sound issues with Rabbi Singer this past Sunday. You want to say hi, Rabbi?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You can hear him clearly? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you clearly.
Oh, that means I have a setting problem only on Rabbi Singer's video doc. I'll have to work on that. Thank you. This was a great test. See, but you did not know you were going to help me out tonight. That's great. That's good news.
Oh, thanks.
Okay. Well, wonderful. Cindy, thank you so much for your question. And Rabbi, have you got her question in full? And you can take it from here?
I got it clear, yeah.
Okay. Cindy, thank you so much for calling in.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. Take care. Bye-bye. Yeah, that's really great, because honestly, sex, drugs, the next one on the list is going to be the topic now, because in your explanation, I want you to go into. I realize this topic is going to probably be a 2-part show, like you mentioned, Rabbi. I get maybe 3. No, I think 2 is probably good, because remember we're nipping the sex part really short. Not okay, no pun intended. Okay, so. Okay, we need to move forward. So I'm going to pass this on to you. I'm digging myself a hole here. Okay, so take this away, but cover, if you would, in states that it's legal to smoke it for recreational purposes. If the state says you can smoke it for recreational purposes, what does Torah state, and how does one supersede the other?
Boy, this is a small topic, so I always get the easy questions. Why am I on this show anyway?
Exactly.
Let's look at the question in general. Then we'll get specific, because there's a lot out there which, I looked into it last week. It's really pretty mind blowing. In a lot of ways. Let's keep in mind, a person, go back to a video we did on reincarnation, when the soul, and the soul goes into the body, right? The purpose of the soul in the body, right? You have a collective unit, body and soul. So if the soul wins out, meaning that person is, being close to God, keeps the commandments, does what they're supposed to do, then it elevates the body and the soul. if a person doesn't do what they're supposed to do, right? So it debases the body and debases the soul, at the same time. So the soul has to be in a body. It can't live outside, the body. So the body needs, it needs what it needs in order to survive, right? It needs food, it needs water, right? It needs sleep, it needs exercise, probably another 4-letter word, exercise, right? Without that, the body cannot exist. Now, the Torah says clear, right? Let's all these, and anyone who's a Karaite will love this. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 15, Torah says, be very careful to guard your soul, right? Now, what does it mean to guard your soul? Rabbis tell us it means that they equated it with the commandment to remember giving of the Torah. You're going to say, oh, what's the connection? Guard my soul. There's a connection. There's a connection to Torah. So yeah, it says guard yourself. Guard your soul lest you forget the day you stood before Hashem, your God, at Mount Sinai. Right? That's Deuteronomy chapter 4, verses 9 and 10. So guarding yourself means preserving your health. Comes along the Rambam. Maimonides says, who was a great Torah scholar and physician, 12th century. Rambam says, pretty clear that maintaining a healthy body is among the ways of serving God. Because if your body's not healthy, can't serve it, right? So therefore, a person has to distance themselves with anything that's going to harm the body, right? So a person has to obviously strengthen the body. You strengthen the body, you strengthen the soul. As well, the Rambam says by exercise, for instance, that the person should have physical exercise. The person won't get sick if they have physical exercise. Again, doesn't mean can't happen, but in general that would be the case. So exercise is important, eating properly is important, all these things. And then we say like this, that says in Exodus chapter 15, verse 26, you listen to the word of God, do what is just in his eyes, give ear to his commandments, observe all his decrees. Then the diseases I placed upon Egypt, I will not bring upon you. So there, Kabbalah, according to the Zohar, Zohar says you got 248 positive commandments in the Torah corresponding to 248 limbs. Right? So someone will say, oh, there aren't 248 limbs. Also it's talking about sinews and muscles and all that as well. And there are 365 Torah prohibitions corresponding to the 365 sinews as well. So now, getting to the question, there's an obligation to keep the body strong. And if there's an obligation to guard it and to keep it strong, they're not allowed to damage it. Now, damage it can mean you're overweight. Damaging can mean, smoking. Everybody knows that smoking is definitely an issue. It definitely is going to cause significant problems. Drug usage is no different. The question is what the damage is. So again, before we get to medical marijuana, it's just the interesting thing that statistically marijuana is the third most popular recreational drug in America, besides alcohol and tobacco, right? So it's been used by nearly 100 million Americans. So you want to know why, Americans don't fare so well in academic tests and other things? Because they're killing their brain cells. Right. So you got 25 million Americans smoked it in the past year. More than 14 do so regularly, despite the harsh laws against it. And you got 50,000 people die each year from alcohol poisoning. We'll get to alcohol as well. Alcohol is probably a topic in and of itself. And it results in 400,000 deaths a year, which is attributed to tobacco smoking. So marijuana, you might say, well, it's not so bad because marijuana, non-toxic, can't cause death by overdose, even though you're killing brain cells. But it can be certainly harmful, short-term memory loss, difficult tasks, hard to do, etc. So it can cause all kinds of things. One of them, interesting, while we're on these topics, they say that there's a strong link between drug use and unsafe sex and the spread of sexually transmitted diseases. which which is interesting because the more a person gets involved in these things, so they they certainly overlap. So it causes all kinds of issues, coordination issues. Especially if an athlete would take it, it causes problems. Now, as the question is, that's a roundabout way of getting to actually to the question, and that is, what about for medicinal purposes? Now, usually marijuana is going to be prescribed for pain, right? To deal with pain. Now, we're not talking in medicinal terms. We're not talking about, huge doses. I've seen videos which are interesting. I don't know, if you can say how valid they are, but sometimes you'll see, a person will put up a video of someone has, let's say, severe cerebral palsy or something like that, and they're flapping all over the place. They can't control their muscles, etc. And then they show like a little bit, they inhale a little bit of marijuana, and all of a sudden, everything is calm, and they can actually, sit, have a conversation. So, is that true? Is it not true? So I'm not a doctor, didn't play one on TV, so I can't say, exactly. But for medicinal purposes, I will say that the OU, the Union of Orthodox Jewish Congregations of America, probably more well known for their rabbinic supervision on food. They have like 50,000 or more products that they certify as being kosher. So they gave the following statement about marijuana, and that is that they, according to them, now others may disagree, but according to them, that medical marijuana can be used for 10 serious medical conditions, right? That will qualify a patient for that. One of them, obviously, is cancer, HIV infection, of AIDS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, right? Say that 5 times fast, or otherwise known as ALS, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, spinal cord injury with spasticity, epilepsy. Now, this is interesting. According to them, inflammatory bowel disease, right? A person has all these stomach aches because of stress, other things. According to them, you can take it for that as well, to calm down the stomach, neuropathy, and Huntington's disease. Now, according to them, they make very clear that these conditions have to have the following associated or complicating conditions, which is cachexia or wasting syndrome, severe chronic pain, which probably most people are going to take medical marijuana is going to be for that, severe nausea, seizures, or severe or persistent muscle spasms. So, according to them, it can only be under, obviously under certain conditions, and, with specific diseases. Now, all these diseases are pretty bad. We're not going to put it on, push it under the rug here. It's, these are all pretty serious things and pretty painful. So, but they make very clear that it can only be when they have this severe, with this severe pain. So now, what was mentioned before, that, that was said in the name of Rabbi Chaim Coffman, so, it should be well. I can't verify that. I'm not, up to date on things that, people say in his name, or not. But I would say that, I wouldn't be surprised, if it's used under controlled circumstances, right? If it's used under controlled circumstances, even if it may cause, seemingly other damage, it's not going to be the same as smoking a joint, or, multiple ones on a daily basis, on a regular basis. That's, it's not going to be that, it's not going to be that that toxic. Yeah, can it cause problems in the long run? Certainly it can, but, what about morphine? Morphine is also pretty bad, and most patients, they don't even think about morphine. Morphine's totally addictive also. We're not even getting necessarily into the addictive, aspect of it, but, a person has cancer, a person is, suffering, what do they give them for the pain? They give morphine, right? So depending on the doses that they give them, they just make them feel comfortable because that disease is an extremely painful. But you don't see people jumping up and down screaming, "No, what about medical morphine?"
Wow, right.
No one's saying anything about that because they're saying, listen, this is giving the person some level of quality, what we'll call, quote unquote, quality of life. People, these people are suffering, to no end. They're in tremendous amount of pain. So morphine, will take the edge off. But what happens when the morphine wears off? They want more. Is morphine addictive? Morphine has all kinds of negative things attached to it. Cause all kinds of other medical complications. But
let me ask you a question, because there's something that is popping in my head. Let's just talk about addiction in general, just for a moment, okay? Mm-hmm. For example, I know people, and I was actually one of them, who Dr. Pepper was like my favorite drink ever. And I was so addicted to Dr. Pepper. I don't know how many of you here in the States know about 7-Eleven, but they used to have the 44-ounce super big gulp, right? I would drink 3 or 4 of those a day. I'm surprised I even have a liver or kidney, whatever that affects. But the point is, when I didn't...
Hey, you look like a pepper.
Hey. I'm spicy like a pepper.
I'm a pepper.
Okay.
Come on.
So, but the thing is, I was so addicted to my Dr. Pepper that if I went like a meal or something without it, I would actually get cranky. I would get up at 2:00 in the morning just to go to the store to get a Dr. Pepper. That's how addicted to it I was. Now, what's the difference between being addicted to, something like that? Then keep in mind, if marijuana, for example, because Dr. Pepper ruins your kidneys. I mean, any kind of soda really will wear your kidneys out, or whatever it is, your liver or whatever. So whether it's a soda pop or whether it's illegal in your state, marijuana addiction, which one is actually worse? Being addicted to marijuana or being addicted to Dr. Pepper? Huh?
Well, they're both bad, right?
Okay, so are we talking 50-50 here?
You could say again?
Are we talking 50-50 here?
I don't know what the statistics are.
No. What I mean with Judaism, which one is worse? Is it like a half and half? Or is it like, no, definitely marijuana is way worse because it's stereotyped? What's the worst of the two?
No, illicit drugs, marijuana would be worse.
Repeat that. What'd you say?
Marijuana would be worse
because
because it has much more serious side effects than drinking Dr. Pepper. I have a friend that used to drink a lot of Turkish coffee, right? It gave him high blood pressure. You drink enough Turkish coffee, that's also bad. But, in tobacco, they put something in there that is addictive, right? So it's not like, okay, a person's going to, smoke a cigarette and say it's only going to be one, right? But there are massive side effects, when it comes to marijuana than it is, Dr. Pepper or Coke. That gets into the whole question.
Like what? Like what? I'm going to challenge you. We're playing Scrabble. I'm going to challenge your words you're producing. Okay. What's worse about, because brain cells, and who needs your brain cells? But who also needs a kidney, right? If that's one of your internal organs that actually too much soda pop will actually destroy. Who's going to say which one is more damaging than the other?
So let's make it real easy. How's the person going to function better?
Marijuana doesn't kill you. Pepper, I see what you're saying. If
you drink a whole bunch of Dr. Pepper, I don't care, you're a redneck, get up at 2 a.m. in order to go out to get your fill of it, and that's what you're going to do. It's not going to cause you to start driving crazy. You might be hyper. Imagine if I was on caffeine, you guys would be dead. You guys wouldn't be able to handle it at all. But, if you're on caffeine, that's totally different than if you're smoking a joint or two, right? Because that's going to cause coordination issues, going to cause, all kinds of different things. You drink a half a bottle or a full bottle of Dr. Pepper, or, you have 3 cups of Turkish coffee, it's going to make you wired.
Okay.
It may do damage in the long run. It ain't gonna do damage right now to your to
One
your
one plus three.
your kid.
One plus three equals B. I think that's their YouTube name. It says William, marijuana causes mental illness. I don't
So
know.
I'll tell you.
I've never
so
really
I'll tell
been.
you what I found.
Okay, so if
So
that's true, then I get it.
So
You're good.
marijuana. Let's look at marijuana for 1 second.
Okay.
Right. So it destroys your health over time. So you can say Dr. Pepper does the same thing, but Dr. Pepper's not going to cause short-term memory loss and the ability to handle difficult tasks.
Okay.
You use stronger types of marijuana, you can't, even more difficult things, are going to be more difficult. Not only that, it's more involved, plus out with alcohol as well, and we'll get to alcohol,
Okay.
right? And more car crashes than anything else leads to illicit sexual behavior. There's definitely, an influence there. You want to talk about young athletes and other things, and then it gets into synthetic marijuana has the potential for more serious adverse effects, hallucinations, kidney damage, seizures, even death. But that's way down the list. That's like number 8, 9, 10 on the list. Dr. Pepper, that's where Dr. Pepper is going to be. So these other things are going to come up.
Okay. I got to throw something out there. Mesa Molina says marijuana does cause short-term memory loss. Wait, what was I thinking? I'm just kidding.
Who are you?
So sometimes that's 100% true. Okay, no joke. From time to time, I'm working in the shop. I'm like, I've got to go to my truck to grab something. I walk from my shop to my truck to get it, and I'm thinking, why did I go to my truck? And I will go back to the shop and keep working, and then 5 minutes later, finally realize what it was. And I don't smoke pot. So I have before twice, and it was not a good experience. So I actually stopped like years ago.
You could be like Bill Clinton. You can just say you didn't inhale. I got stoned, but I didn't inhale. Okay.
Man.
You have a 32 IQ, even though he became president. Okay, no offense.
Hey, you know what? Cindy Gray has a great point. She said, any intoxicant leads to illicit sexual behavior. You know what? I can't say that that's wrong. I don't know. I think that she's probably right on that.
There is. So. I mean, there's no coincidence between alcohol usage and certainly in that. What do you think you're doing in a bar? No, I'm just here to get a drink, listen to the music. Yeah. Yeah. It's like I'm looking at Playboy for the articles. Okay. They have great humor. Are you serious?
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Great humor. No picture. I'm not interested.
That's funny. Okay, let's take a pause real quick. 855-952-4253. Call in with the question regarding tonight's topic: sex, drugs, rock and roll. Meanwhile, Rabbi, take about 2 minutes, and we have some new viewers out there now. And just introduce yourself real quickly. I'll give you. It's really funny. I watched a video that we did this last time about 2 episodes ago, and I told you the same exact thing. I said, go in here and introduce yourself. But then I wound up introducing you, and I never even let you speak. So go ahead, tell them what you do. What's your bread and butter? I say that respectably. What do you spend most of your time doing, and why are you doing it?
You gotta watch, go back to the Muppets, you got these 2 old guys at the beginning saying like, why do I come to this show? Why do I watch this? So I, as well as, answering these controversial issues that I give classes, people want to convert, certainly convert to Judaism, or people don't want to convert, not interested, want to stay as Noahides. So I deal with both sets of, both groups. Have a page on Facebook called Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism, also Beyond Noahides, and a blog, orthodoxconversion.com. So there you'll get information about conversion. I also have videos I make on the Torah portion of the week, on the holidays as well. I have a YouTube channel, Rabbi Chaim Coffman. You can check all that out. There as well. And, while we're throwing that out there, I also just want to mention that I did make a course called Discover Your Biblical Path, which is a 6-module course of people coming out of idolatry. Anyone interested in, either the path of being a Jew or staying as a Noahide, how to find a rabbi, community, 7 testimonials of people who were in the process of conversion or finished conversion, and also people who stayed as Noahides and what they went through. So give people information, I don't care which way you go. That's your choice. But, at least a person coming out of idolatry should have something to look at to understand what exactly they're going through, what their options are. And if anyone wants to contact me, they can contact me, Rabbi Chaim Coffman at gmail.com. RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN at gmail.com.
That was wonderfully said, Rabbi. Thank you for that. That's good. And I love it because anytime I have questions, see, I'm different than you guys in the fact that I actually have these rabbis in my shirt talking. I can actually call them in the middle of the night, and they will answer me, because if they don't, I won't put them on the air anymore. I'm just kidding. Okay, welcome to the show. Please tell us.
I have been blackmailed. That's true.
Yeah, there you go. Welcome to the show. Please tell us your name and where you're calling from.
Hey, wil'Liam. It's Courtney.
Hi, Courtney. How are you?
I'm good, and you?
Good. It's good to hear your voice again. Do you have a question for Rabbi?
I do. Actually, I have a question for him. I was wondering if he had looked at Exodus 30:23. I'm sure he has. The translation of cannabis.
Okay, hey, Courtney, real quickly, and I feel I'm just for all the viewers out there, Courtney is a friend of mine on Facebook, and but I failed to tell you about the show. We try to keep it topic related. Is it topic related? Because I actually don't know that verse by heart.
Yes, it is actually.
Perfect.
I kind of related. I'm asking him if he thinks that this is cannabis in the actual holy anointing oil.
Oh, wonderful! That's a great. Okay, don't hang up just yet.
Because
hey, Courtney.
Yeah, because we know in history that we've seen that they use hemp. So I was wondering what he thought about that.
Oh, nice. Don't hang up yet. Do me a favor. You were the one who informed me that with Rabbi Singer, I was having a sound issue. You couldn't hear the rabbi. Rabbi, say hi to Courtney. This is a new friend of mine. And Courtney, please tell me if you can hear him clearly.
Shalom.
Look at that. See, my connection's good. Everyone can hear me.
So, Courtney, you can hear Rabbi fine?
I'm sorry?
Can you hear the rabbi just fine?
I can hear somewhat. I hear you better than I hear him.
Okay, we had a caller earlier. You probably were watching. So it may be something with your phone, because earlier the show, we had another. She could hear him clearly. So we'll work on that later. I just wanted to do that as a quick test since you were the one who helped me with the last time. So so tell me the verse number again. I'm going to pull it up right now, and we'll put it on screen. Okay, Exodus chapter.
Okay, it's Exodus 30:23.
30:23, got it. Okay, and let me put up the English.
And you'll see it translated. King James does calamus. However, I have thoughts on calamus. If we're talking about intoxication and we're talking about things that induce hallucinations and things of that matter. So I was wondering what he thought.
Okay, well, that's great. Okay, well, thank you. And what's really funny is I've never paid attention to the word calamus in that verse before, and I've read that dozens of times. So thank you for pointing that out. Okay,
well,
Courtney.
I'm an herbalist, so that's probably why.
Hey, you're a great studier, and that's what's gonna help us all. So, okay, let's hang up. And
okay, well, I'm excited to hear. Thank you.
Okay, you betcha. Thank you for calling in. Bye-bye. Okay, so I'm going to put that on the screen. Go ahead and start talking about that, and give me a minute. I don't have a screen capture for it yet, so I'll set that up while you're talking.
All right, so not going according to King James here. Let's just we'll go through my translation there. That here it's talking about the incense, or the anointing oil that was put up. It says God spoke to Moshe saying, verse 23. Again, chapter 30, verse 23, it says, take for yourself a choice of spices, 500 shekel weights of pure myrrh, right? What myrrh is. Fragrant cinnamon, half of which shall be 250 of a fragrant cane, right? So there were spices that were put together that Moses commanded to take this oil and spices to anoint and consecrate the vessels of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, and also for Aaron and his sons when they are consecrated as well. And it would also be used for the kings of the Davidic line, of the Davidic dynasty, and the high priest, the Kohen, as is known as the Kohen Gadol. So according to this translation, which I'm not going to rely on King James, right? So it's some sort of, it sounds like cinnamon or some other fragrant cane. I've never heard, and this is no proof for anything, that, my experience has not been that, that this was used for, medicinal purposes. Doesn't mean it wasn't. I can't say. I'm not sure. According, to what I see here, I'll have to look into it further, but, what I see here, it's not talking about that. It's not talking about that, that specific spice. And in either case, let's say it was, you have other spices in there that's all ground up together. So, even if it would be, it probably doesn't have the same effect as if it would be, by itself. So, it maybe gets offset by, by this myrrh and this, and this other stuff.
Okay, so what word, because they did not transliterate, so to speak, what word that is. Verse 23.
Yeah.
Let's see. Pardon me.
So one of the words, it says, Hamesh Mod Cinnamon, right? Cinnamon is cinnamon.
Oh,
Besem is some sort of spice, some sort of fragrant. Besem means like from botsem, like for
now
like
shimon.
a fragrance.
Now is there any connection between besemen and shimon, which is oil? Like I know it's a sin shin, but
here it's a totally different root. The root over here is botsem. Now I just interesting.
Oh,
the root of the word is bet shin mem, right? Which means like a fragrance. Now, on Purim, right? The Talmud says chai vinish li besume, same root.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
A person is obligated li besume. It means literally. Rashi says there to get drunk.
What is the word? What's the word for the calamus or calame or whatever that was?
I don't know.
I mean, what's the word in the Hebrew that they're using in verse 23?
Again, it's kinnamon besem, which is fragrant.
The kinnamon besem right here. Okay, got it.
Right, that's fragrant cinnamon. And then it says
machatzito, which is middle or half or noon or something like that.
Yeah, machatzito means it means it means half, right? 250. Chamishim u'matayim is 250.
Oh, okay, got it. Okay.
Ukineh boisem, again, is another type of fragrance. Doesn't say what it is. It's some sort of fragrance. And then it says 200, and it says 200, right? 200, it's going to be 250 of, of that fragrance. So I don't know where, I don't know where they get that from, because later, if you look at verse 25, it says you shall make oil of sacred anointment, a blended compound.
Okay.
Blended compound, the handiwork of a perfumer. So it's like you're taking this and you're mixing it all together. So again, even that's why I can't rely on Mr. James or King James or whatever you want to call him. And, I have no idea where he gets it from. But even if, let's say, somehow he throws it in there, and that's what it means. If you go to verse 25, everything, as we mentioned, by oral tradition, you have to look at in context, right? So if you look at here, it says it's all put together and ground together. So I would assume, and again, I'm not a perfumer, I didn't play one on TV either, but I would assume when you take these things together with the oil, and you're going to make it into this anointing oil, you're going to put these fragrances together, unless it's like so much more potent than anything else, it's not going to have necessarily the same, effect as it would be alone. But someone will say, wow, the wine back then was much stronger than we have today, because it's, today our wine's much more diluted. That's why when the Talmud says that, he drank the 4 cups on Passover, like one of the rabbis was like hungover, right? Another like 40 days, because the wine was so, strong. So, someone could come back and say, oh, look, maybe, the medicinal of all of it was so strong, it offset everything else. Now that could be.
Wow. Right.
I'm not saying not, but I would assume, And again, you know what happens when you assume, but I would assume to put these things together, it should not have the same potency as it would be if it was alone.
Okay, question for you, just to complement what Courtney's question was, because in my mind I'm thinking I couldn't even imagine a world back then, in Torah days, where they weren't already aware of this plant, this
Right.
this hemp, wonderful, climbing rope. Not that they use it for climbing rope, but I guess they could. It's supposed to be very strong. But I can't even imagine that not have been something that they were aware of. So, is there anything that you were aware of in the Hebrew Scriptures that would lead us to believe that they had something like that they used? I mean, even nowadays we have the old Indian movies where they're smoking peyote, and it's like it had to have been something somebody experimented with in biblical times. Is there anything?
Yeah, so that I don't know. That I'd have to research. But
okay, that's fine.
Would it surprise me that they knew about it? No. I mean, they knew about plenty of things that people say, oh, they were medieval, they were this. Yeah. You look at the Rambam. The Rambam lived in the 12th century. Maimonides lived in the 12th century. He was a doctor to the king, to the sultan, and he understood the properties of plants, of herbs. So you go to a doctor today, you say, I got a backache, I got this, he'll say, take this, take that. And you say, why? He says, don't ask me why, it works. Just take it. Right. Doctors always get annoyed by that. So, but the Rambam understood though what the medicinal things that came out of these plants, and he said, oh, you have this, take this. Why? Because this is what the plant is good for. This is what its its properties are good to use. So so for that sake, he understood he's medieval. Yeah, the doctors know the medicinal, properties of plants, and they'll tell you, oh, take this and take that. So, yeah, if they're more holistic, they will, but he'd say, oh, but the Rambam knew that, 800 years ago, 750, 800 years ago. So,
okay.
He's medieval.
Okay, let's move on. We've got about 10 minutes before the show is supposed to end, and I say supposed to because I don't necessarily plan on ending at 9. But, if we end up at 9, that's fine. But let's move on to the final topic, rock and roll. Not just rock and roll. We'll call it secular music in general. Now, my understanding.
What about?
Yes.
So before you get there, what about alcohol? You want to deal with alcohol, or you want to get?
Yeah. Well, to me, yeah, I would say so. That's probably a good point. Let's go a little bit over. We'll shoot for 9:15. So let's do alcohol first. That's a good point. Let's keep it connected to the drugs because technically it kind of is. I will tell you. No, I'm not going to tell you anything. Anybody who wants to know, you can message me. I'll tell you later. I'd rather hear you talk than me. So alcohol in general is a drug in the sense of not that it's a solid item. It's a liquid. We get that. But it still has the same. It has the same effect on our body in the general sense of it. It manipulates the way we feel. It stimulates our thoughts, or in one way or the other, whether it's. No, I'll stop there. So tell us, what does Judaism teach? Because we have seasons, and in the even in the Torah it says, these 3 times a year, and it says, you do this, go sell this, and go buy a strong drink. Explain all that to us, and tell us what our liberties should be, and when we are actually overstepping that.
All right, so let's get a little bit of background before we get into that. So in 2015, you had 15.1 million adults ages 18 and older, which takes 6.2% of this group as alcohol use disorder. 15.1 million people. That is quite a huge number. Mostly are men, 9.8 million, etc. Now, you look at the youth, 12 to 17, that's also pretty high. It's 623,000, or 2.5% of their age group that are abusers, right? Estimated 88,000 people die from alcohol-related causes, making alcohol the 4th leading preventable cause of death in the U.S. So there's a lot of misuse as well. And just to drive home the point, $249 billion were used, where 3/4 of it was total cost of alcohol misuse, which came from binge drinking. So I don't have to speak about underage drinking. We all we all know what that is and seen it, but it can certainly interfere with all kinds of things. Injury, sexual assaults, death, right? When I was in college, there was somebody, which this is always a bad idea, somebody drank a full bottle of Everclear, right? Anyone knows what Everclear is? It's like 190 proof grain alcohol. You drink a whole bottle of that, you'll die.
Exactly.
It just give you blood poisoning, right? So, alcohol is interesting, is a pretty serious, thing, and it's, again, it's the fourth highest. It's pretty incredible. The fourth highest cause of death that is preventable. Now, as you brought up, what does the Torah have to say? Now, the Torah says that we're obligated to start off our festive days, and every week by Shabbos is to make Kiddush, right? You sanctify the day with something that is potent, something that is strong. So we know that to be wine, right? During Shabbos day, there are people that make Kiddush on schnapps, on liquor, on hard liquor, but, certainly many make on wine. You can also make on grape juice as well. There are some rabbinical authorities say it's not a good idea to make on grape juice for different reasons. But, we see that kids are subjected, certainly, to alcohol. There is, a person eats fish. Let's say you don't eat fish and meat together. The Talmud says it's a danger if you eat fish and meat together. If you ask any doctor, or they'll say meat and fish. What's the problem? So the answer is we don't know what the problem is, but we don't eat fish and meat together. So normally, if a person ate fish first, they would have like a strong drink or eat bread or something to like wash out the palate before you eat meat. So kids are subjected, to wine, to liquor on a weekly basis. Now, you might say that's not a good thing. It certainly could lead to, addiction, and alcohol is definitely a depressant, as well. But, the more that we hold by, Jewish ritual and holding to what the Torah says, we don't, Jews in general doesn't mean it's not an issue today, because it is becoming more of an issue, but, Jews in general are off the charts when it comes to alcohol addiction, right? We don't even measure up compared to everybody else. And the interesting thing is that within Judaism, alcohol comes up a lot, especially by the holiday of Purim as well, but, comes up on a weekly basis. So you would think that since it comes up on a weekly basis, you're going to have all these alcoholics, right? So, but that's not true, because statistically, we don't come close to that. There is an issue today. I'm not going to say there isn't. There is definitely an issue today, within Judaism, within Orthodox Judaism, where there is a alcohol addiction, issue, right? Which has, really has never been. This is a very strange generation, especially the fact that I'm part of it. But, it is, right. If the further, bottom line is, the further away a Jew goes away from tradition, then statistically they're going to be like everybody else, right? It has nothing to do with, no offense to the Irish, no offense to, the Italians, anyone else who likes to drink. We are not on the spectrum at all if we are holding the way the Torah wants us to be. But that shouldn't be the case, right? Because the reality is we come in contact with this all the time. So, on a weekly basis. So exponentially, there should be a higher risk. But, if we hold true to what tradition says and what the Torah wants from us, then we don't measure up. We don't measure up at all. But, again, it is becoming a problem today, especially among, Orthodox youth, for many different reasons, that they're getting involved in drugs and alcohol. And, there've been a number of, suicides as well by teenagers, which is totally tragic. So the Torah permits it, but obviously, if you look at, if you look at the book of Leviticus, I think it's chapter 19. Let me just bring it up here. The beginning of Parshas Kedoshim, in the book of Leviticus, chapter 19. Right, the beginning of chapter 19, okay. God says, verse 1, Hashem spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the entire assembly of the children of Israel, say to them, you shall be holy, for holy am I, Hashem, your God. Well, that's a great statement, right? What does it mean to be holy? According to, certain non-Jewish groups, being holy means I should run outside when it's 35 below, in shorts and a tank top and run around in the snow, right? And show how, I'm so great in aesthetics. Well, we hold that the 614th commandment, right? 614th commandment is don't be stupid. You don't have to run outside when it's 35 degrees, below zero, to show how holy you are and run around in the snow, right? That's not a Jewish concept at all. So what does it mean to be holy? So the Ramban, Nachmanides there says that, and he says clear, that it means that there are things that are permissible, right? There are things that are permissible. You're allowed to eat, you're allowed to drink, right? But Torah doesn't say you're allowed to be a glutton. Torah doesn't say you're allowed to be 50 pounds overweight. That's totally unhealthy. Also, the Torah says you're not allowed to, you're not allowed to be a drunk. But it says, but it's permissible to drink, right? So if it's permissible to drink, I can have a drink. You're right. You're allowed to have a drink, but you have to be holy in the eyes of God. Means within reason. You want, the person wants to have, some here, some there. It's not going to cause any effect. There are statistics that show a person has a cup of wine a day, or maybe a few shots of scotch, maybe the same thing, right? Will keep a person, people, they say there's health things in it that, is good for the heart. Maybe say it's a crock, whatever. But, at the end of the day, we're given things that are permissible, for us. It's just we're not allowed to abuse them. So, the same thing, we spoke about, sex a little bit before. That's the strongest urge that, God gave to a human, but it has to be used in the proper way, right? It has to be harnessed. So someone will say, well, why did God give it so strong anyway in the first place? Well, that's exactly the reason, right? He gave you the desire. He wanted you to enjoy. He wanted you to have pleasure. Obviously, there has to be ways to do it. There have to be boundaries. Because if there are not boundaries, well, you see what the world looks like.
Absolutely.
And the world, it's not God's fault, but he put it in the world so a person can have free choice. He can use it. He can abuse it. So the Ramban says that God does not want you to abuse things in this world. He wants you to use things within reason. What are you going to say? I have to fast 4 times a week. That's not a Jewish concept. You have to fast when you have to fast, right? But you don't fast when, that's not, there are people that do fast once or twice a week. They're working on themselves, whatever. But most people, we're a very weak generation. It's not good for most people, right? But, if things are permissible, so you're allowed to use them, So, is it a person's fault, or is it God's fault? He allowed people to create Turkish coffee, and if you drink too much of it, it's going to give you, high blood pressure. He didn't tell you to drink 4 cups a day, so you can be wired and be awake, get more sleep, right? Not like me, but, get more sleep.
You don't need coffee.
I don't need coffee. It's true, right? So figure out how to do that, but, don't drink, gallons of Dr. Pepper, right? It's going to short out your mind. It's going to fry your liver, all these other things. But it's permissible. So if it's permissible, it means I can't abuse it. I'm not allowed to abuse it. God gives you free will. You're not a robot. So again, I would think if if a person's making kiddush every Friday night, every Shabbos day, you're using wine, right, or using, you have liquor in between, I would think it's going to make someone into an alcoholic. But again, statistically, we're not in those statistics unless you go further away from Torah. And if you go away, the further you go away from Torah, then you're going to be like anybody else. You'll be no different than a non-Jew. And, and you'll be subjected to all these different things, which is bad. right? Because we're supposed to be different. The whole purpose of what we do, is to be different. This week's Torah portion speaks about, what you're allowed to eat, what you're not allowed to eat, the laws of being kosher. That one of the reasons is to make us different, right? The Torah says clear. It's to differentiate between you and everybody else. So we have different, we eat different things. We have different holidays. All these different things are to make us different, not better, right? Even though the Torah says we are God's chosen people, doesn't mean we're better. It just means we have more obligation, right? We have more obligation to do things, and it should elevate body and soul, right? It doesn't mean, if a person's a Jew, they're brought up as a Jew, or they convert, it means, oh, we're so much better, right? The Torah, the only reason that we're different is because the Torah makes us different. But the further away you go from that, then, we're no better than anybody else. We're just as non-Jewish as, as a non-Jew, even though we may have that, genealogy that makes us Jewish because our mother was Jewish, but that's it. Doesn't mean anything else, more than, certainly more than that. And if we, abuse things and do things that certainly are not fitting for Torah, then that's 100% a desecration of God's name. That's not what He created us for.
Right. Okay.
Right?
Let's. Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead. No, finish up. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say that again, the more we're in tune with what we need to do, then we are totally different. We don't show up on the statistics at all.
Okay, let's take the next 10 minutes and discuss the final phase. I think we will go ahead and touch base again a second week. So next week, let's do a follow-up, part 2, sex, drugs, rock and roll, and we'll cover some questions that if we can retract them again, the ones that have been showing up tonight on chat. Apparently, we have a lot of bashful people out there who don't like making phone calls. So, so it'd be better to have you guys call in with your questions rather than putting them on the YouTube chat. It's hard.
It's like being a blogger and signing, I think this and that, and I'm so strong, signed anonymous.
Okay, so last 10 minutes dedicated to secular music. Country, rock and roll, pop, doesn't matter what it is. Secular music. My thoughts are basic. It's like anything else. If you're addicted to it and it causes you to drift away from God, that's the simple answer. What about Judaism? What is the halakha?
So, if you look at secular music in general and Jewish music today, a lot of tunes of Jewish music, come from secular music, right? They're just Jewish, words to it. So there's a whole question, even before you get to secular music in general, what about using Jewish themes and lyrics to non-Jewish music, right? It's happened throughout the centuries. The Talmud actually brings up the question, can I use David HaMelech, King David from Psalms? Can I quote Psalms and put a beat to it, like do? Can I put a beat? It's gonna be in my head. It's gonna get me, sing and dance and praise God. So
yeah, your pause was good. Pause where you're at. Let's take this call. We'll come back to
freeze frame.
Freeze frame. Okay, caller, please tell us your name. Where you're calling from?
Yes, this is Candace from Liberty Hill, Texas.
Hi, Candace. Are you a friend of mine, Candace? This is the Candace that I know.
Yeah. Yes. It's been a while.
It has been. It's been well over what?
Weather for a couple of years.
It's been more than a couple, maybe 7. I'm glad you're better. It's interesting, actually. Okay, go ahead. Tell us if you've got a question for Rabbi. Let's
Candace, wil'Liam, I feel your pain. Okay,
yeah, you should, because I've known Candace. Actually, I've known Candace for in the real world now for probably close to 25 years, actually. And so we
right after the show, I'll be praying for you.
Now you understand why she waited so long to call me, 15 years.
I hear that.
I have that effect on people, especially women, except for my wife, of course. Just kidding.
All right, let her talk.
Candace, glad you called in. What's the question for Rabbi?
Yes, and in fact, the music you were just bringing up, I no longer, it also because I don't have a radio, but I no longer listen to secular music because it does not, I just get away from that because it doesn't uplift me to serve the Lord. However, I do listen to jazz and to instrumental, and I was wondering if that's okay, because when you're talking about Jewish music, or you speaking about to explain Jewish music, I just want to see if the instrumental or jazz is okay along that area, but I stay away from any other music.
Right. Okay. Cool. That's definitely a fair question, and for sure, I think it's kind of cool because I'm with you. For me, my passion actually is country music, and Rabbi, some people know, a few people know that my past life, I spent a handful of years in Nashville, actually singing country music, entertainment style, at a couple clubs in Nashville. And so nowadays, when I sing country music, it takes me. I can just say that when I'm singing country music, the last thing on my mind is anything but country music. And if our goal is to keep Hashem in our presence, El Panay, then I could say for me that's probably a problem. So Candace, thank you for calling in. It's good to hear your voice again. I'm glad you're doing okay.
Hey, thank you. Look forward to hearing it. Bye-bye.
Hey, great. Thanks. Bye-bye. Okay, Rabbi, take it away.
Excellent question. So I'll answer it like this. Like that type of music for me, it's like what a dentist plays when you're sitting in the chair, right? No offense to anyone who likes classical, classical
now
music.
Now that you mentioned it, that just terrifies me.
All of a sudden I think, okay, here we go. All right,
Oh, boy.
let's see that molar. Bad news. Anyway, anyone, hopefully I didn't offend anybody there with dental music, but music that's going to relax a person. The Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Elijah Vilna says, like, one of the highest levels to reach in this world is the gate of music. Now, obviously, it has to, it should uplift the person. Most people need music today, for the next number of weeks. So can't listen to instrumental music because, at least for Jews, because of the counting of the Omer and the death of the 24,000 students of Rebbe Akiva. So it's hard for most people. So, in that sense, not to digress. So a person wants to listen, to these type of things, so, that shouldn't be a problem because it's just, it's even if there are words, right? Even if there are words, if it's instrumental, it shouldn't be a problem. It shouldn't be a problem at all. Now, lyrics may be a problem. What I was going to mention, on this is that, if you listen to the lyrics, obviously, to most music, the lyrics are pretty bad, whether it's rap, gangster rap, or other things, the lyrics are pretty awful. Not just the lyrics themselves, but the message. Yeah, I mean, you have both together. You get the lyrics, and the message. Remember that old song, boom, boom, boom. Let's go back to your heart. So I'm dating myself. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
you're definitely dating yourself.
Yeah, this is a pretty solid message,
Right.
Or bad message, or whatever, whatever you want to call it. So lyrics are definitely bad. So you have to know if so you say I'm not listening to the lyrics. I'm just I'm listening, to the music. So
I'm just
again,
reading the articles.
Right. So if a person's listening to classical music or what I'll call dental music or, whatever it is, there's probably nothing wrong with it because it relaxes them. Right. But,
Yes.
at the end of the day, and this is something we all have to ask ourselves, and that is, at the end of the day, is this going to affect me and affect my soul and affect the way I serve God? Is it going to be positive or negative? Right? So if it's going to get you to think things and, whatever that you wouldn't normally think about by listening to it, then it's probably not a good idea. If it's just to relax you, and that's all it's going to do, so that shouldn't be
Right.
It should be an issue. By Jewish music, there is a tremendous amount of Jewish music that definitely sounds like rock and roll.
Yeah, especially
Right?
now that there's a new guy out there. Well, he may not be new. He's new to me. Mata Shahu. He's like what's the phrase? What's the phrase I'm looking for? The Jamaican style.
Yeah.
Jewish, but he's amazing, and it's like highly addictive for sure. So, hey, Rabbi, let's do this. Okay.
It depends what frame of mind it's going to put
Right.
you in. Say, it can put you in a frame of mind. You're going to go now smoke weed. So, okay, that's bad, right? So that's the topic. See, look, the whole topic comes back.
Right. Okay, Rabbi, do me a
How do
favor.
we get on to this topic?
Okay, Rabbi, take the next 3 minutes and summarize tonight. Tell us all what we need to take away from tonight. Take home with us. What do we need to know about tonight that should change our perspective for tomorrow?
that we saw according to the Rambam, according to Maimonides, that there's a mitzvah from the Torah that you have to guard your body, right? Or you have to guard your soul. Literally, that means to guard your body, to take care of your body. Now you have body and soul together. So anything I inhale, anything I ingest should be something that's good for my body. So you're going to say, hey, what about that candy bar I ate? Or what about these other things that probably have all these chemicals going to kill me? Okay, so, you have to eat also. So a person has to be careful what they eat.
Sure.
What they eat as well, and person should be relatively healthy, should exercise, etc. It's it's a big it is a big thing. Most people sort of push it by the side and don't say, oh, poo, yeah, it's a good thing, but I don't exercise, I'm 20 pounds overweight, or whatever. That you need a healthy body, and healthy body will lead to healthy hopefully to healthy soul. But
sure.
I think the bottom line which we just mentioned, is the fact that anything you do, and this should guide us in all aspects of life, right? Our goal is that God gave us a body and soul, right? Now that soul is trapped in the body, so the soul can only shine when the body and soul are in sync. If the body gets debased by any number of things, like we mentioned, then the soul sort of shrinks. And it has to you have to restart it, kind of like trying to restart a Humvee with a 9-volt. Good luck, with that. So
right.
You put so much garbage on your soul, it takes a huge effort in order for it to shine. So whatever we do, this is what we should take out. Whatever we do, we have to ask ourselves: is this good for my soul, or is it bad for my soul? And if you're not sure, ask. Right? That you don't want to do anything that's gonna you're going to take 3 steps backwards, and it's going to take you a lot longer, to try and get to the place where you want to get to. Imagine, you're in that store, say, oh, I forgot my keys. You try and run up a down escalator. Yeah, try that. Try running in space and, hey, how come I'm not getting anywhere? Right? So, that's the question.
Right.
That's really the question we have to ask. And after 120 years, God's going to say, why didn't you do what you were supposed to do? And God's going to pinpoint everything that you did. You're going to say, really? Even when he thought it was safe to read National Geographic in the bathroom, said, hey, why did I do that? So, that's our whole goal in this world, whether you're a Jew or non-Jew. Even a non-Jew doesn't convert. You have to know how to tap in. And tapping in is the whole world. That's what we're doing in this world, is tapping into God's world and being attached to that. So, a person's going to say, yeah, I'm not going to learn anything from, the lyrics and the music is good. Boom, boom, boom. Yeah, tell me. Are we living in Victorian England? I don't think so. Click my heels 3 times. Toto not going to be in Kansas either. Right? No offense to anyone who lives in Kansas, her name is Toto. Right? But,
his name is Toto.
that is
oh my
the
God.
reality.
You're crazy.
Yeah. I always would say, anyone who doesn't know anything, it's no offense to anyone who's a potato farmer in Idaho. And I have some students in Idaho. It's like, oops, forget that one. Can't use that anymore.
That's funny.
It's no offense to anyone who's a potato farmer or lives in Idaho. So, it is all about my connection to God. So ask yourself, if I listen to this music, let's say, well, we just said before, if I listen to classical music, is that going to enhance my relationship with God? Is that going to put me on an even keel? If the answer is yes, then it should be okay.
Sure.
If not, it's going to make you think back to your hee-haw days, singing Dixie, where you could never get hee-haw anyway, because one of these channels, you had to hold the antenna upside down before cable, right, in order to get it. So, if that's going to make a person, get up and dance, it's going to enhance their, relationship to God. So, yeah, that should be, that should be okay.
Let me make this.
It has to be under those circumstances, within boundaries and parameters.
Okay, so let me do this. This is going to be the final topic, and I'm going past my 15-minute over, but that's okay. This to me, this is going to be really important for all of us. My question would be this: does God have a problem? Does Hashem have a problem with us if we want to just detach and go hang out and do karaoke for the night? Or does God expect us to stay focused on Him 120%, 110% every moment of our lives without taking a break? Does He want us to just be completely zoned in to him completely. And the reason why I ask this is because you hear all kinds of stories in the Midrash, just let's take Nadav and Abihu, for example. I've heard stories about their situation. The strange fire wasn't. I've heard the bad sides, of course, with what is assumed what they did, but I've also heard another a positive side on the fact that they really was trying to detach themselves so much from the world that they were just being fully engulfed in Hashem, and I've heard so many stories. According to Torah, for the Jew and for the non-Jew alike, for the Noahide who's seeking God,
right.
Does God have a problem with this if we just want to go hang out with our friends for the weekend?
Good. So, yeah, I got it. Just, if you look at Nadav and Avihu, just look at that for 1 second. You remember the song, "Can't always do what you want." Yeah.
But if you try sometime, you just might find. That's a song you do not want to sing at a wedding.
Exactly, right. Yeah, on the table, right? So they were on the highest level, and they had this fervor to serve God in such a way, but God said you can't do what you want when you want. Right? There are boundaries. There are parameters. That's why, some people feel like they're in a box. They say, well, can't I say my own prayer? Can't I do my own thing? Yeah, you can up to a point. Right? But, there are parameters. There are boundaries. If somebody, can tune in 100% of the time, from the minute when they wake up and they go to sleep, they don't need these other things. They don't need to go out to nature. They don't need to relax or, whatever the case is. They relax by learning or learning something lighter or whatever the case is when they're more tired. So, for them, that's great. They don't need that, but, there are people that, need some downtime, right? Now, needing some downtime means that your main focus has to be on what I'm doing, right? Learning, if I'm working, when I'm not working, I should be learning. Right. And therefore, a person has to be, certainly focused. But, we live in a very, we live in a world that's, tremendously chaotic. There's a lot of stress from all over, so, whether it's job, whether it's a spouse, whether it's their kids, whether it's, illness, all kinds of things. So people say, I just want to relax. I just, the world is heavy, right? That is true. It is. At the same time, there are times where, you close the Gemara, you stop listening to a class and you go out, right? There are things that a person needs for themselves, as well. But again, let's make clear, and that's why I think it's crucial that everybody has a mentor, right? A rabbi, a mentor, someone that can guide them. Because, if someone, let's say someone becomes, an Orthodox Jew overnight, they're born Jewish secular and they become an Orthodox Jew and they get, they get into things and they're very excited or whatever, you got to tell them to slow down because otherwise they're going to burn out. And even if a person has been born with this and they've grown up with it, et cetera, there have to be boundaries of what's, some downtime, because not everybody can be laser focused, 100%. For some people, it may be every so often, going out to nature. Rav Victor Miller, Zecher Tzadik Livrocha, may his name be blessed, used to see God's glory and God's magnificence by walking out to nature, by going to forests, by seeing, apple trees and seeing the miracle of creation. And that gave him tremendous belief in God. Is that for everybody? Certainly not. We all going to be Dr. Doolittle. We're going to walk with the animals. We're going to all do that? No. There people don't like animals. They're allergic, other things. But, if somebody enjoys going out to nature and that gives them a higher purpose, it helps them in their service to God. What's wrong with that?
Right.
But again, should a person be doing it on a daily basis and forget about prayer and forget about this and forget about that? No. Things have to be done, within parameters, within boundaries. And at the end of the day, this is why guidance is needed, because people can go off the deep end.
Right.
And if people go off, the deep end, it's much, much harder to bring them down, to this world, and make them normal. You have to live in this world the way God wants you to. You can't go to extremes, right? The Rambam says, if a person has a character trait they want to fix, they should go to one extreme and meet in the middle, right? Eventually come to the middle, right? The middle path is the best way, because you go to one extreme, you're finished. You're never gonna be able to sustain it, and it's gonna differentiate, you from everybody else. And the Rambam says you can't do that, right? It's one of the 24 things that stops a person from repentance, is separating himself from the community. He can't be so radically different than everybody else. But it doesn't mean, you can't do these other things within reason, because at the end of the day, and a lot of people need this, if it enhances my service to God, within boundaries and parameters, that's definitely not a bad thing, right? But you have to know. Some people will say, it's probably another topic we won't get into. What about sports? What about entertainment?
Ooh,
what if I relax, doing that? So I would tell somebody, go to a ball game and sit in the bleachers, right? Sit in the place where tickets are $2 and everyone's drinking beer, and tell me you're just there to watch the game. And you're not gonna, that's not gonna influence you otherwise. Right, you're gonna say, oh, that's extreme. This and that. Yeah, go to a sporting event, see what happens, see what people say, what people do, how they act. That's the bottom line. Is this good for me, or it's not good for me? Right, in my service to God. And most likely, and you're talking, to someone who is a sports junkie, and a news junkie and all that. So, it definitely has its effect. It's fun. It's definitely entertaining. In many ways. And imagine if you didn't have sports on the weekend, what people would be doing. There'd be more murders and all kinds of things.
Right.
So you stick 50,000 people in the stadium, that's a good thing. Forget TV, it's you keeping them off the streets. What they do in bars and other things is a different issue. But, at the end of the day, you're keeping people safe. But, but again, if I see what these people do and how they act, am I really learning sportsmanship from these people? Am I learning the qualities that's going to help me serve God from most of these people? Absolutely not. You wouldn't want to be, caught dead, in an alley. I remember, just tell this story while we're finished. I was once on a train in New York, and I heard this guy. I was like, whatever, this very tall guy speaking and this and that, and he was speaking about Mike Tyson. So I'm dating myself. This guy saying, I did this, I did that, and who's this guy? Anyone knows anything about boxing way back when? So this guy was Mitch Blood Green. Anyone who knows who he is? He fought Tyson. Tyson killed him, and they got in a fight somewhere in Harlem, like 3:00 in the morning one, one night. I don't know what either one of them were doing there, but and here's this guy going on and on. I'm sitting on the train. I'm like, wow, this guy looks really, familiar. But I can tell you, if you saw this guy, you wouldn't want to be, you won't want to be in a dark alley late at night, or maybe even in broad daylight. And again, it has nothing to do with, with color or anything else. Just, who he was. And, so, so you can say, okay, boxing's different. Okay, maybe it is, but, we're not learning how to be quaint people in Victorian England by watching this stuff. That's for sure enough.
Right. Very good. I'll tell you what, Rabbi, it's been a great show. You've just done an amazing job, and your dedication, like I said a second, and I really appreciate your time. And so next week, same time, same place for actually all you viewers out there. So and also there's rumor that TORAH Talk is moving and in the tabloids, and that is true. And if you want to know more about it, you can actually look in the most recent videos. There is a short video about 7 minutes that will explain everything. So but we will continue the show. You may see a few shows, maybe for a couple months, that it might be a little bit more generic than what we've been producing, but we're going to continue the show nonetheless. So just hang in there with us and keep tuning in. Send Rabbi an email if you have any direct questions. Rabbi, tell everybody what your email address is so they can actually find you.
Okay, it's Rabbi Chaim Coffman, RabbiChaimCoffman @gmail.com.
That was a little complicated. Rabbi Chaim Coffman at gmail.com. So if you have
any... Or you can find me Facebook, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism. You can text me there also.
Yeah, and you might be able to send them a friend request. Some of these people are getting a little bit popular. So if you can't, just send them messages if you have any direct questions regarding tonight's show.
I only get hate mail. I'm not so popular, so don't worry about it.
That's why you're on...
If you want popular, you go to TORAH Talk. You want hate mail, you send it to me.
So next week we'll do the same show, same time next week. We'll do a lot of the same topics, and we'll just see where it leads. So the phone lines will stay open, so you guys call in for sure. I really enjoyed seeing so much activity tonight on the YouTube channel, and so I look forward to seeing you all next week as well. So Rabbi, thank you again for all your time, and all you viewers out there. You guys rock. We love you, and we'll see you next time on the other side. Take care, y'all.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom.
חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, שאיפה